They say you can tell everything about a man by how he dresses and what he drives. I'll let you in on a little secret. The people who believe that are always the most surprised when they find out how wrong they were. Last Saturday, at a dinner table I was never supposed to matter at, a very well-dressed man found out exactly what 30 years of underestimating the wrong person actually costs. Welcome to Father's Revenge Stories. Pour yourself something warm, find a comfortable seat, and stay with me, because the people in this story had every opportunity to choose differently. They just didn't. Drop a comment when you're done, and make sure you're subscribed. This one is worth it. My name is Thomas Reeves. I am 63 years old. I drive a 2004 Chevy pickup that rattles on cold mornings like it's clearing its throat before a long day. My work boots have seen 30 years of job sites, the leather soft in the places that matter, worn through in the places that don't. My hands are calloused in the specific way that happens when you spend a lifetime doing work that actually matters, not work that looks like it matters, but work that keeps the lights on while everyone else is asleep. If you passed me at the hardware store on a Saturday morning carrying a box of wire connectors and a cup of black coffee, you would not look twice. That is not an accident. That is a decision I made a long time ago and have never once regretted. I am an electrician, have been since I was 22 years old. Most people don't think about electricity until it stops working. That's fine. I built an entire life on being the man nobody thinks about until it's too late. There is a photograph on my workbench, not framed, just tucked between a can of electrical tape and a box of wire nuts, held flat by the weight of things around it. It has been there for 11 years. It is a photograph of my daughter Claire at 22, the morning she passed her nursing board exam. She is standing in my garage doorway in her scrubs, holding the letter, laughing at something I said that I can no longer remember. Her mother had been gone for 3 years by then. It was just the two of us. She called me that morning before she even opened the envelope. She calls me every Sunday at 9. Not because I asked her to, just because she does. She started when she was 19 and moved into her first apartment and discovered that Sunday mornings are quieter than you expect when you are on your own for the first time. She called that first Sunday. We talked for 40 minutes about nothing in particular. She has called every Sunday since. That photograph. Those Sunday calls. Remember them. They are the reason for everything that happened last Saturday. 3 years ago, Claire married Daniel Hargrove. Daniel is 36. He wears suits that fit him in the way that communicates both success and deliberate effort, which is to say, he wants you to know he can afford the suit and also that he chose it carefully. He shakes hands firmly and makes eye contact a half-second longer than necessary. The handshake of a man who read about confidence somewhere and practiced it until it felt like his own. He is the CEO of Meridian Energy Solutions, a solid company. 412 employees, contracts with major utility networks across the region. Good fundamentals. When Claire first brought him home, I shook his hand and said all the right things, and I thought, this man has never once been genuinely surprised by his own success. You can always tell. There is a particular quality to people who have been exceptional for so long that they have stopped questioning it. A kind of shine that comes not from hard work, but from never having been told no by anyone who mattered. Daniel was not a bad person. I want to be clear about that. He was a man who had been given a story about the world, about his family, about himself, and he had never once had a reason to look at it too closely. Until last Saturday. Let me tell you about his father. Richard Hargrove is 68 years old. He is the kind of man who has spent 4 decades making other people feel slightly less certain about themselves without ever saying anything that could be directly quoted. It is a skill, a practiced one. I have known men like Richard my entire life. They are always the most confident in rooms where nobody knows their history. I have known Richard Hargrove for 30 years. He does not know that. 30 years ago, I was 23 years old. I had been working as an electrician for 1 year, saving every dollar, building something from nothing the way you build things when you have no other option. I took a subcontracting job for a construction company called Hargrove Development. Richard was the founder. The company was growing fast. Too fast, I would come to understand. He was expanding into commercial projects he did not have the capital to complete, using funds from one contract to cover the shortfalls of another, and keeping 2 sets of records. I was 23 years old, running wire in the walls of buildings financed with money that did not belong to him. I did not understand what I was seeing at first. I understood it the way you understand a faulty circuit. Not all at once, but as a pattern that keeps appearing in the readings until you cannot ignore it anymore. Small things. Numbers that did not add up. Payments that arrived from accounts that had no business being connected to the projects I was working on. A nervousness in the project managers whenever the books came up in conversation. I started keeping notes. My father raised me to keep records. It was not a decision so much as a reflex. When the company collapsed 18 months later, Richard was ready. He had spent 6 months preparing his story. The accounts had been mismanaged. There was one name attached to the financial irregularities that investigators would find when they looked. Mine. I was 24 years old. I had done nothing wrong. I had the documentation to prove it. Every work order, every payment record, every discrepancy I had quietly noted because something had not felt right. Richard had better lawyers and more time to prepare. The investigation concluded with no charges filed and my name attached to a company that had collapsed under suspicious circumstances. It did not destroy me, but it cost me 3 years of rebuilding and one significant business relationship I had been counting on, with a man who decided the risk was no longer worth it. I kept the notes. I kept everything. I rebuilt. Slowly. Quietly. The way you rebuild when you have no other choice and no one is watching, and that is exactly fine because you were never doing it for an audience. Power Grid Holdings exists today because a 24-year-old electrician decided that the best answer to being wronged was not anger. Anger makes you sloppy. The best answer was documentation, patience, and time. Power Grid Holdings manages energy infrastructure across 4 states. We operate through a network of subsidiary companies, each with its own name, its own management, its own identity. My name appears nowhere obvious. I have never given an interview. I go to the hardware store on Saturday mornings and nobody looks twice. Meridian Energy Solutions is one of Power Grid's subsidiaries. Daniel Hargrove has been the CEO of my company for 3 years. He does not know that. As far as Daniel knows, he was recruited through a competitive executive search process, interviewed by an independent board, and earned the position on the strength of his qualifications, which, to be completely fair, are genuine. He is good at his job. I have read his performance reviews personally. I approved his compensation package. I signed off on his annual bonus. And every Sunday morning, his wife calls her father to talk about nothing for 40 minutes. I never intended to tell anyone. Not Daniel, not Claire, not anyone. I had built it that way deliberately, because money changes the temperature of a room, and I did not want Claire to grow up in that temperature. I wanted her to choose her life freely. I wanted her to choose her husband because she loved him, not because she was managing a relationship with a man who owned things. I wanted her to call me every Sunday because she wanted to talk to her father. She did not know. She still does not know. I had made my peace with that a long time ago. Then Richard called his son. Daniel called me. And the logbook in the bottom drawer of my workbench stopped being a memory and became something else entirely. The call came on a Thursday evening. I was in my garage, running new wire to a circuit panel I had been meaning to update for 2 years. One of those projects you keep meaning to finish and somehow never quite do. My phone buzzed on the workbench. Daniel. Thomas. Warm. It is always warm. My parents are hosting a family dinner Saturday evening. They've been wanting to sit down with you properly. Just a real family dinner, all of us together. Would you be able to make it? I set down my wire strippers. In 3 years of marriage, Richard and Margaret Hargrove had expressed exactly 0 interest in sitting down with me properly. The last time we had been in the same room, Claire and Daniel's 2nd anniversary dinner, 7 months ago, Richard had spent the entire evening in conversation with everyone except me. When he finally acknowledged my presence, it was to ask, with the polished disinterest of a man performing courtesy, whether I was still doing electrical work. Margaret had asked me twice that evening what I did for a living. In the same tone both times. "Of course," I said. "What time?" 7. "I'll text you the address." "Thank you, Daniel." I hung up. I sat in my garage for a long moment, looking at the half-finished circuit panel on the wall. Then I walked to my workbench and opened the bottom drawer. The logbook was still there. 30 years old, pages yellowed at the edges, slightly warped from the humidity of 2 different garages across 3 decades. The ink was still clear. I had checked periodically over the years, the way you check on something you hope you will never need and cannot quite bring yourself to throw away. I looked at it for a long moment, then I closed the drawer. Not yet. I picked up my wire strippers and finished the circuit panel. The lights came on. I went inside, made dinner, and went to bed. I slept fine. I have always been able to sleep before something important. My father was the same way. He said it was because we had learned to trust our own preparation. Saturday arrived the way significant evenings always do. Quietly, without announcement, like it had no idea what it was about to become. I dressed the way I always dress. Clean work pants, a plain button-down shirt pressed the night before. My everyday shoes, polished but unremarkable. No watch worth mentioning. I stood in front of the hallway mirror for a moment and looked at myself. A 63-year-old electrician, about to have dinner with people who had spent 3 years deciding I was not worth looking at twice. Yes, that is exactly right. I drove to Westfield. The Hargrove house sat at the end of a long private driveway lined with hedges trimmed to the centimeter. The kind of hedges that require a dedicated groundskeeper and communicate one thing clearly to anyone arriving. We control things here. Even the plants answer to us. A young man stationed near the entrance looked at my truck, then at me, then back at my truck with the particular expression of someone whose mental math is not adding up the way he expected. He recovered professionally. "Good evening, sir. I can take your car around." "She pulls a little to the left," I said, handing him the keys. "Don't let that alarm you." He nodded with the focused expression of a man trying very hard not to have any further feelings about the vehicle he had just been handed. I tipped him before going inside. More than he expected. Some things are worth doing before the main event. Richard opened the front door. Tall, silver-haired, the kind of physical presence that has spent decades being the most important person in whatever room it occupies, and has grown comfortable with that fact. His smile when he saw me was warm and practiced in equal measure, assembled rather than felt, the smile of a man who decided in advance how he would feel about this evening, and has no intention of being surprised by it. "Thomas," he extended his hand, "so glad you could make it." Firm handshake. The kind that communicates a message. Mine was firmer. He didn't notice. Men like Richard rarely do. They are so busy sending signals they forget to read the ones coming back. Margaret appeared behind him. Elegant. Assembled. She took both my hands in hers with a warmth so carefully constructed I nearly checked the instructions. "Thomas," she said, "you are just as sweet as Claire described." Sweet. The first word out of her mouth. Sweet, the word people reach for when they want to be kind about someone they have already decided does not quite belong. I have heard it used for golden retrievers and elderly uncles who fall asleep after dinner and do not quite follow the conversation. They all seem to take it well. I took it well too. "Thank you, Margaret," I said warmly. "You have a beautiful home." She beamed. It is one of the more reliable facts about people who have built their identity around what they own. They never tire of hearing their possessions complimented. Claire was across the room. She came to me the way she has since she was 4 years old. Completely, without hesitation. The hug of someone who is simply glad you are there and sees no reason to be complicated about it. I held on a moment longer than usual. She did not notice. Or perhaps she did and understood without asking. Daniel stood behind her. He looked at my outfit with an expression he controlled very quickly. Just a flicker, a fraction of a second. The particular look of a man who had perhaps mentioned the dress code and was doing the math on how that conversation had gone. And then he smiled. "Thomas, glad you made it." "Glad to be here," I said, and I meant it more than he understood. We moved to the dining room. The table was set with the kind of deliberate formality that takes hours to arrange and communicates one specific thing before anyone has said a word. Some people belong here, and some people have been invited. Crystal glasses, heavy silverware, candles that had clearly never been lit before tonight and would likely never be lit again, purchased for the occasion, for the atmosphere, for the message. I sat down, unfolded my napkin, and I became exactly who they believed me to be. A quiet old electrician, Claire's retired father, the fellow with the funny truck who doesn't quite fit the room but has been allowed in as a courtesy. I wore that role like a work jacket, comfortable, familiar, and not one person at that table suspected for a single moment what was underneath it. Richard led the conversation the way men like Richard always do, from the front, with the full confidence of someone who has never once been told he was talking too much. He spoke about the energy market, about the extraordinary instincts his son had demonstrated at Meridian, about the vision Daniel was bringing to an industry that needed new thinking. "The board respects him enormously," Richard said, swirling his wine. He glanced at me, not unkindly, the way you glance at a piece of furniture, acknowledging its presence without expecting it to respond. "Some men are simply built for this kind of work. You know it when you see it." "You must be very proud," I said. "We are," he said, already moving on. Margaret turned to Claire. The warmth in her voice had a specific shape, the warmth of a woman delivering a compliment designed to make someone feel grateful. "And you must feel so secure, sweetheart, having a husband who provides so well. Not every woman is so fortunate." The table went slightly quiet. Claire smiled graciously, but I saw her eyes. I know her eyes. I have been reading them since she was 4 years old, learning to hide disappointment because she did not want to make me feel bad about something. She was doing it now. I picked up my water glass, took a slow sip, said nothing. Margaret asked me about my work, or rather, she performed asking about my work. The words were a question, but the tone was a conclusion. A retired electrician. How nice. How practical. She nodded at my answer with the focused attention of a woman who had already decided where to file it and was simply waiting for me to finish. Richard talked about a property development he had consulted on recently, about a golf trip to Scotland, about a restaurant in the city that had disappointed him last week. He talked with the easy fluency of a man who has never in his life worried that he was taking up too much space. Daniel sat across the table from me. He was quieter than usual, attentive to his father in the specific way of a son who has been told something important recently and is waiting for it to be confirmed. He laughed at the right moments. He agreed in the right places. He did not once look at me directly. I noticed. I filed it. For 2 hours, I was exactly who they believed me to be. I asked polite questions. I complimented the food. I let Richard talk about his legacy, about the values he had built into his family, Integrity, hard work, loyalty, protecting what belongs to the people you love. I listened to all of it and said nothing. The logbook in my workbench drawer had been waiting 30 years. It could wait 2 more hours. Then Richard reached beneath his chair. I had been waiting for this moment since Thursday evening, since the half-beat pause in Daniel's voice when he said, "My parents have been wanting to sit down with you," since the particular quality of warmth in a man's voice when he is delivering a message someone else composed. Richard placed 2 folders on the table, side by side, deliberate, the placement of a man who has rehearsed this moment and is satisfied with the staging. "Thomas," he said, his voice dropping into the measured register menus when they want you to understand that what follows is serious and has been thought through carefully. "There are things from the past, things that were never properly addressed, that we believe deserve to be made right, for everyone's sake." I looked at the folders. I looked at Richard. I looked at Daniel, who was looking at the table. There it was. Richard opened the first folder. A formal financial claim. Compensation for alleged damages from the collapse of Hargrove Development 30 years prior. My name on the liability line. A number in the upper right corner that represented, as best I could calculate, approximately everything a retired electrician might reasonably be expected to have. He opened the second folder. Claire's name was at the top. A document requesting that she relinquish her rights to any future inheritance from her father, to be transferred into a joint marital account, to be held as collateral for the family's ongoing financial interests. "This is about making things right," Richard said, "for everyone at this table." He looked at Daniel. Daniel reached out and slid both folders toward me. It was a small gesture, practiced, the gesture of a man who had been told this was his role tonight and had decided to play it. Margaret turned to Claire then, gently, with the assembled warmth of a woman who has decided she is doing someone a kindness. "Sweetheart," she said, "this is about your future, your family's future. All Thomas needs to do is sign the first document, acknowledge what happened, and you sign the second one. It's a formality, and everything can move forward the way it should." Claire looked at the second folder. Her name was on it. She looked at Daniel. He was looking at the table. She looked at Margaret, who was holding her smile in place with both hands. She looked at Richard, who was watching her with the patient expression of a man who believes he has already won and is simply waiting for the other party to understand that. And then she looked at me. I want to tell you exactly what I saw in my daughter's face in that moment, because it is the thing I will carry with me for the rest of my life, long after everything else about that evening has faded. She was not looking for permission. She was not looking for an explanation. She was not calculating what this would cost her or what she stood to lose. She was looking at her father, a 63-year-old electrician sitting at a table where he had been treated like furniture for 2 hours, in his plain button-down shirt and his unremarkable shoes, with his calloused hands folded quietly on the white tablecloth, and she was making a decision that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with 30 years of Sunday morning phone calls and a photograph tucked between a roll of electrical tape and a box of wire nuts on a workbench in a garage. She had no idea I was wealthy. She had no idea what I owned, or what I had built, or what was sitting in the bottom drawer of my workbench. She only knew one thing. Her father had never once asked her for anything, and she was not going to sign a document that said he owed someone else everything. She pushed the second folder back across the table. "No," she said. Quiet. Final. The way a circuit breaker trips. Not dramatic, not angry, just a complete and immediate stop. "My father doesn't owe your family anything, and I won't sign anything that says he does." Richard started to speak. Margaret reached for Claire's hand. "Claire, sweetheart, I don't think you understand what—" "No," she said again. Same voice, same certainty. The voice of a woman who has made up her mind and sees no reason to explain it further. The table went very still. I had not known what she would do. I want to be honest about that. I had hoped. I had believed. I had looked at that photograph on my workbench 1,000 times over 30 years and told myself that whatever I had built, the most important thing I had built was the kind of relationship where my daughter would know, without being told, what kind of man her father was. But I had not known. Now I knew. I picked up my water glass, took a slow, deliberate sip, set it down with a quiet click against the white tablecloth. Then I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. Not a phone, not a business card, a folder, worn at the edges, 30 years old. I placed it on the table between Richard's two folders, smaller than his, considerably more complete. If you've made it this far with me, do us one quick favor. Hit that subscribe button and leave a comment. It costs you nothing, and it means everything. Thank you. Now let me tell you what happened next. You've been carrying your version of this story for 30 years, Richard, I said. My voice was quiet, even. The voice you use when you don't need volume because the words are already heavy enough. I've been carrying the actual records. I opened it. Bank statements going back to 1993. Internal memos. Wire transfer documentation. A handwritten ledger, Richard's own handwriting. I had confirmed this with a document examiner 12 years ago, showing the movement of company capital into a private account over 14 months. And correspondence. 3 letters, written in 1994, discussing the plan to attach a subcontractor's name to the financial irregularities before the auditors arrived. The subcontractor's name was mine. Richard's version. Thomas Reeves mismanaged funds. The young electrician was responsible for the losses. The actual record. Richard Hargrove systematically moved company capital out of Hargrove Development over 14 months to fund a private investment that went badly. When the auditors came, he needed a name. He chose the 24-year-old subcontractor who had no money for lawyers and no connections in the industry, and who, by all appearances, would simply absorb the damage and disappear. He was right about most of that. He was wrong about the disappearing. The room was very quiet. Richard's face had changed. The assembled confidence was gone. Not gradually, but all at once. The way a structure fails when the load-bearing element gives out. In its place was the specific expression of a man who has spent 30 years hoping a particular door would stay closed, watching it open all the way. "That's not," he started. "It is," I said simply. I was 24 years old, and I understood that the truth only matters if you can prove it. So I proved it. And then I waited. I reached into my jacket one more time. A card, matte black, no name, just an embossed number and a crest. Power Grid Holdings. I placed it on the table. Meridian Energy Solutions, I said. The company Daniel has been running for 3 years. The salary he earns. The board he reports to. The performance reviews I have read personally, and the compensation package I approved. I paused. Meridian is a subsidiary of Power Grid Holdings. Power Grid Holdings is mine. Has been for 19 years. I built it starting from nothing, after your company collapsed and attached my name to the wreckage. Absolute silence. "You have been working for me, Daniel," I said quietly, "since the day you were hired." Daniel was looking at the card. His face was doing something I had not seen before. Not the controlled expressions of a boardroom or a dinner table, but something underneath all of that. Something younger. Something that looked like a man watching the ground shift beneath a structure he had believed was solid. He looked at his father. "How long have you known?" he asked, very quiet. Richard said nothing. "Dad?" An edge in Daniel's voice I had never heard. "How long have you known who Thomas was?" The silence that followed was Richard's answer. It was also, I suspected, the most honest thing Richard Hargrove had communicated to his son in a very long time. I stayed completely still, because what was happening across that table had nothing to do with me anymore. It had everything to do with a son seeing his father clearly, perhaps for the first time. The right thing to do in that moment was nothing at all. So I did nothing. I watched. Richard straightened, reached for the version of himself that had always known how to take up space in a room when the room turned against him. "Everything I did was for this family," he said. "That man cost us everything we had built. You were finally in a position to what?" Daniel's voice cracked on the word, and then hardened the way things harden when they have been held under too much pressure for too long. "Use my wife, use her father, to settle something that, based on what is sitting on this table right now, was never what you told me it was." He looked at the logbook, at the bank statements, at the letters in Richard Hargrove's own handwriting. "You told me he destroyed our family," Daniel said. His voice was very quiet now. The quieter things get in that moment, the more they tend to mean. "You told me that story my entire life." Richard opened his mouth. "Don't," Daniel said. Just that, one word, and Richard closed his mouth. I looked at my son-in-law for a long moment. "The claim and the document requesting Claire's signature," I said. "I won't be responding to either. What happens with the rest of this is between you and your father." I stood up, buttoned my jacket. "Thank you for dinner, Margaret," I said, because she had played her role and done what she believed was right for her family, and the kindness of acknowledging that cost me nothing. Claire was already standing. She had not said another word since no. She did not need to. We walked out of that dining room, through that house, past the art on the walls and the staircase that curved upward with the confidence of things that have never been questioned, down the long private driveway with the perfectly maintained hedges. The young man brought my truck around. He looked at it with the expression of someone who had come to a complicated peace with the vehicle over the course of the evening. I tipped him again on the way out. He looked surprised. Some things are always worth doing twice. I got in. The engine cleared its throat. Claire sat in the passenger seat. We drove home through the dark, and neither of us spoke for a long time. The city moved past the windows. At a red light, she put her hand over mine on the gear shift. "Dad," she said. "Yeah?" "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I thought about the photograph on my workbench, a 22-year-old in scrubs laughing in a garage doorway, the logbook in the bottom drawer. 30 years of building something in the walls, invisible and constant, because the building needed the power even if nobody thought about where it came from. "Because I wanted you to have the chance to love someone without my past following you into it," I said. "And because I wanted you to call me every Sunday because you wanted to talk to your father, not because of anything I own." She was quiet for a moment. Then she held my hand tighter and didn't let go until we pulled into my driveway. I sat in the truck for a minute, looked at my house, modest, warm, lit from the inside the way a house looks when it has been lived in honestly for a long time. Then I went inside, walked through the kitchen, out to the garage. The circuit panel was still open. I had left it exactly where I was when Daniel called on Thursday evening. Work half finished the way work always is when something more important interrupts it. I picked up my wire strippers and finished the job. The lights came on. Electricity runs through the walls, and nobody thinks about it until it stops. I built my life the same way. Invisible. Constant. Present in everything without ever needing to announce itself. Last Saturday, at a dinner table where I was never supposed to matter, the right people finally understood what had been running through the walls all along. That is enough. That has always been enough. If this story resonated with you, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of this.